HMOs, lease option agreements, BRRR. So many different property strategies and so many abbreviations, but which one is right for me and my goals? Let's find out. Firstly, welcome back to my channel. For those who don't know, my name is Jamie and this is my journey into the world of property. And today we'll be looking at the different strategies available for property investment. So without further delay, let's get straight into it with buy to let. Buy to let is very simple. You simply buy a property and then you rent it out to a tenant. This involves saving a lot of cash, a lot of capital, but relatively low risk compared to other strategies if you do your research. Let's say I bought a property for £80,000 with a 25% deposit of £20,000 and I rented that property out to a family for £500 a month. That will give me a gross profit income of £6,000 or growth yield of 7.5%. And if you consider my return in investment, I originally invested £20,000 deposit, stamp duty fees and legal fees, which would give you a return of investment of around 11%, which is relatively a good return in investment. For the majority of these property strategies, you will need a 25% deposit to put down on the property. Now, if you're living in London, that is going to be a very, very big deposit. Now for me, I am currently living in a shared ownership property, so I own a percentage of this property, and this property is currently worth around £300,000. So if I were to try and buy a property equivalent to what I'm staying in, a one-bedroom flat in London, I will need a deposit of around £75,000, which is absolutely crazy. So this is why a lot of property investors invest where house prices are considerably lower on average. So they go further up north to Nottingham, Manchester, Liverpool. A really good example of a property investor investing outside his area is Justin Wilkins, who I believe lives down south further than London and invests in property in Liverpool. So that is a massive distance for him to cover, but he outsources all his management fees to a letting agency to allow him to receive passive income. I will leave a link to some of his videos below. Make sure you check them out. They're really interesting and he's really honest about his numbers. So the pros of buy to let are it's simple and straightforward to use. It's easy to manage, so you only have one tenant to manage. And potentially you could receive a passive income if you outsource all the work to a letting agency. But of course, you'll be sacrificing a portion of your profits. The cons, however, to a buy-to-let, voids. So your property is not tenanted for a certain amount of weeks, months, you still have to pay the mortgage. As I mentioned, you need a 25% deposit, which is a lot of money upfront. And compared to other property strategies, you are minimizing your cash flow each month with a buy-to-let. Next strategy is HMOs. HMO stands for House of Multiple Occupancy. This is where you purchase a property and instead of renting out the whole property, you rent out individual rooms. Now let's take a real life example from a book that I recently read by Rob Dix called The Complete Guide to Property Investment. It's a really cool book and easy to read, so if you're interested, I'll put the link in the description below. Now Rob purchased in Liverpool, where the house prices are a little bit cheaper, a 3-bedroom house which he rented out to students. The purchase price was £60,000 and the 25% deposit was £15,000. Adding on top of that stamp duty, legal fees and refurbishment costs of around £10,000, his total cash investment was £28,300. He rented each room out for £82 per week, and per month that generated him a gross profit income of £1,065. Now with HMOs, a downside to them is that all the bills are generally included in the monthly income. So that £82 you will have to pay for as the landlord, water, council tax, electricity, gas, all those utility bills you will have to pay for. So Rob's monthly net profit after he paid all his bills and expenses was around £358 or £4,308 per year. This is considerably higher returns compared to a buy-to-let. So the pros of a HMO, you're maximizing your income as opposed to if you were to rent the property out as a buy-to-let. You're also diversifying your risk. So for whatever reason, one room is unoccupied, you have another 2 rooms to earn your income, as opposed if you were to have a buy to let and the property was not occupied for a certain period of time, you'll be getting no income at all. There are specific HMO regulations which you will have to adhere to, like installing fire alarms, fire doors. As I mentioned, you have increased expenditure by paying all the monthly bills, and there's more maintenance involved in a HMO. And from hearing other people's experiences, it is a lot of management managing different tenants and making sure that they all get along in one house, because these could be complete strangers living together and it's not all going to be happy days all the time. So it can give you a lot of headaches. And lastly, you might need a large amount of capital to get you started for the deposit, but also the refurbishment. BRRR. Now, BRRR stands for buy, refurbish, refinance, rent. And the idea is to buy a property below market value, refurbish the property to restore its true value, and then refinance, get a new mortgage, and then take the equity out to recycle your money into other property investments while still having an asset which is generating you a monthly income. Now let's look at another real life example from Rob Dick's Complete Guide to Property Investment. In this example, we are in Manchester, and let's take a row of houses, and let's say each property has a value of £80,000, but there's one property on that street which doesn't really have a working bathroom or kitchen, and you can't really get a mortgage on that property. So that property value is decreased to £55,000. Now for properties like this who generally don't have a working kitchen or bathroom, you cannot get a mortgage on that property. So what a lot of property investors look into is bridging finance, which is basically a short-term loan to lend you that cash while you renovate and then sell the property or take the equity out of the property to repay that short-term loan. So for this example, this property investor made an initial 25% deposit and then used a bridging loan for the remaining amount up to £55,000. They then invested another 10k into refurbishment, so redoing that particular kitchen and bathroom, and then they refinanced or got a new mortgage on that property at a 75% loan to value, which basically means that the bank will loan you 75% of what the property value they think is the property value. So with that new refinance, you will now have enough money to pay back the bridging loan, pay all your particular fees, and then at the end of that, you will have cash money in your bank account, which you can then reinvest and recycle your money to buy more properties. This is a very common property strategies, which has been very successful for a lot of investors, and something that I'm really interested in finding a lot more about. So if you have any comments about this strategy, please hit me up in the comment section below. So the pros of a BRRR strategy is that you will be recycling your cash. So your cash is not locked into that asset. You are taking that money out and reinvesting into new properties. And at the same time, you are generating a monthly rental income from having that property tenanted. And let's not forget capital appreciation. So over time, we know, generally speaking, property values increase. The cons to this strategy is you need to be super hot on your project management. So if you go over budget, if you go over timescale, that is going to cost you money. There's also a lot of management to consider for this process in terms of the day-to-day project management. There's a lot of moving parts, so beware. If you're thinking about this strategy, you need to make sure that you can manage your time to be able to fit this in, or outsource that project management to somebody else, which is going to ultimately eat into your profits. Also, this strategy is very dependent on the market at the present time of when you're selling it. So you might not get the valuation that you were looking for, which could ultimately cost you money. So quite a risky strategy, but it could end up paying you dividends in the long run and get you buying more properties in a shorter space of time. Next strategy is buy to flip. This is all about buying a property below market value, redoing it, refurbishing, and then selling it on to a profit. And as you know, if you watch Homes and the Hammer, this seems the easiest thing to do, but in reality, it's very difficult. Now, the majority of flips may require you to buy at auction, and if you're buying at auction, you cannot use a mortgage because you need to pay the balance of the property within 30 days. So as I mentioned in the previous strategy, a lot of investors use bridging finance to purchase at an auction. But for cash buyers, you could get a really, really good price outside of an auction if you're buying in cash. Now let's look at another example for a buy to flip. Now let's say a property in Nottingham is currently worth £90,000 in its current state. There's a lot of work to do to it, but we know if we can put that work into it and add value to the property, that new value could be worth around £140,000. We would need to put a 30% deposit down if we're using bridging finance. The bridging loan will cover the rest of the property of £60,000. And then we also need to be aware of stamp duty, legal fees, and of course our refurb budget of, let's say, 18k. Now that's a total cash investment of around 49k. In this example, we managed to sell the property for £140,000 as we planned. So if you take the original £90,000 away from that, we are left with £50,000, and taking away all our expenditure in terms of refurb costs, stamp duty, fees, bridging loan, finance, interest and fees for the transaction, we are left with a pre-tax profit of around £20,000. Now the pros to a buy to flip is that there's no tenants to manage. You are purely managing the project of the property to renovate it to its true value. There's high potential returns, but let's consider the cons as well. Like I said, if you go over budget or over time scale, this could increase your costs considerably. So there's a very, very high risk of going over budget and eating into your profits. Also, there's a lot of management and project management to consider, which can be very, very time consuming and cause you a lot of headaches as an investor. Now, the next strategy is quite an interesting one, which I really want to learn a lot more about, and that's called rent to rent. Now, for this strategy, you don't require a deposit. Yes, you heard me correctly. You don't require a deposit, and you don't even have to own a property. How crazy is that? So essentially, you are renting a property from a landlord, and then you become the landlord and manage that property and rent it out to somebody else. Now, you're probably thinking, why would a landlord do that? There's a lot of landlords out there who don't want the hassle and the headaches of being a landlord. They don't want any voids in their property. All they want is their money so they can cover their mortgage. And a lot of property investors see this as a great opportunity, as a win-win scenario. So as a rent-to-rent property investor, I might rent out that property as a HMO rather than a buy-to-let to maximize my monthly income so I can earn a profit. So as I mentioned, pros, there's no deposit required. You don't have to own the house. The cons, however, is that there's increased management of the tenants. So you need to make sure that you have enough time to deal with all the tenants, making sure that all the rooms are rented, because ultimately, if they're not rented, you still have to pay the mortgage. Also, it might be quite hard to find these particular deals. Now, this is something that I would like to kind of research and find some more information about. So if you do have information about finding these type of deals, please let me know. Lease option agreements are interesting too. They kind of work like a rent to rent, but at the end of the term, you buy the property, you agree to buy the property. And the good thing about this is, let's say you have a lease option agreement where you're paying a landlord a monthly fee to cover his income, and then you're renting out the property as a HMO, generating your monthly cash flow, maximizing your monthly cash flow. Now, you set a purchase price at the start of your term and pay it at the end of your term. So what we know about properties is that they appreciate over time. So let's say you agree to purchase a property for £100,000. In 5 years' time, that property might have increased in value to £120,000. So you have made £20,000 in capital growth, as well as maximizing your monthly income. The pros for a lease option agreement: the capital gains over time, little upfront costs, no deposit, and you don't have to own the property. Cons, as I mentioned, where do these deals come from? You have to do some digging, you have to do some research to make sure you find those particular deals. More management, more tenants, more headaches that you have to absorb as the investor. So as you can see, a lot of property strategies to consider when getting into property. It's not as simple as just buying a property and renting it out. For me, as someone who's trying to get into property, I will consider a number of different strategies within my portfolio. To start off with, maybe a rent-to-rent might be good because I don't need that upfront cash. But I also like the stability of just a simple buy-to-let. But you would need that initial deposit to get you going, which can be a barrier. Let's not forget HMOs. For me, HMOs are a fantastic opportunity for you to maximize your monthly cash flow and generate that passive income. I've got some thinking to do. I've got a lot of money to save as well. Let's not forget that. It's not easy out here getting on that property ladder. So if you have any thoughts on anything that I've discussed, if you're a beginner and interested in getting into property, let me know what your property strategy would be. It'd be interesting to see if you're on the same lines as me or if you have any different thoughts. Equally, if you are a property investor and you have a portfolio of investments, let me know which strategy is best suited for you and your goals. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. So make sure you hit me up, comment, like, and subscribe to see more videos as I continue my journey into becoming a property investor. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time.